Why you mad? Cause my pussy pops severely and yours don't.
Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. It is Jamsis, your favorite not cleaver of the season. And today we're just going to be playing a few matches where I'm not trying to play any specific style, so it's gonna be like a continuous stream of matches. Some context though is that I did lose like 12 or 14 matches in a row, which is like quite impressive even for me. So I'm like pretty tilted when I start playing this game. But yeah, I just learned that if people take Conqueror Lilias, DJB, and Lidica away from me, I just kind of lose. So that is something that I have to work past in the next few weeks, because I'm finding that Conqueror Lilias is getting banned more and more. It's like she's a broken unit or something. Like, it couldn't possibly be that. Anyway, we're just gonna be playing these matches, and as always, if you like my content, subscribe to my Patreon. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have a Patreon. Could you imagine? And yeah, in the first game, I picked pretty normally, in my opinion. Like, Conqueror Lily's first pick is not very cleavy, but my opponent literally went like balls to the walls anti-cleave against me. So now I'm like fucking backpedaling as hard as I can. I'm not too sure who to pick here. Like, I'm pretty sure if you pick Kayron confidently into Conqueror Lilias, like it's some form of DJ Kayron. Designer Lilibet makes it difficult to draft anything too. So I'm kind of stuck in a situation where I pick DJB and Ida just to like stun this Bryce area, or like stun this Bryce area. Like, you'll see how that works out. I blame Lidica just in case it actually does manage to outspeed my DJB somehow, and my opponent actually bans Conqueror Lilias, which wasn't what I was expecting. So while we're waiting to start the match, I get a bad feeling and I switch my Steny to the HP imprint, to the team imprint. And what do you know? Like, half his team is like base speed and about to counter my ass. So I just do a precursory S1 into Bryce area, and that Bryce area resisted my Yolha. My Yolha has like some effectiveness, so the fact that this Bryce area is resisting me is a huge red flag. And then this like absolute psychopath is running a counter resist Bryce area, so that tells you what's about to happen with my team. If you didn't notice, I didn't press S3 with DJB because DJB has this like proof damage reduction when his S3 is up, and since I'm not really cleansing off anything and I don't really need the push either, I just hold on to it because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna need that defense reduction in the upcoming turns. All I need is for Yolha and maybe DJB to survive, because all those units are at 1 HP and that's all I need. So I try going for the blind on to his DPS units with DJB, but like it doesn't happen, of course, because they're running F-res like a fucking maniac. Ida dies, or like she's close to dead, but she probably wasn't surviving this Bryce area into Seven anyway, so I just have to hope that this guy isn't running 500 gear score units that have damage, ER, and effectiveness. And luckily, it turns out that they only run ER and some damage, so I should be fine. I'm pretty sure my Yolha should be able to survive this S3, but my opponent actually goes into the DJB here. And that big brain moment from earlier where I gave Steny's HP imprint actually lets DJB survive, and I somehow win against this psychopath. So like no shade to this guy. Like, he had a very creative team, and I respect the hustle, and it was very close. So like, damn, but like, stay away from me, please. You know? Anyway, we move on to the next match where we pre-ban the same stuff, and my opponent unluckily pre-bans 2 of my core units in Conqueror Lilias and Steny, so I'm forced to pick DJB, which I don't love a DJB first pick, because if they decide to go cleave, he's not like the best, because he's not on Water's Origin, so he's not the best pick into cleave, or at least not my DJB build. A lot of people do run Water's Origin DJB or Eternatus, and that's like better into cleave, but that's just not the type of DJB I can build with my gear. Unlucky. My opponent picks Aiden and DN, like, oh, what unit is that? So I pick Lidica because Lidica should be able to comfortably outspeed. And I pick Sylvan Sage Vivian because she's like a safe-ish neutral DPS. She also deters, you know, Landy and like other annoying stealth DPSs like Stenny if she was up. My opponent, of course, whips out their Solitaria. Like, ever since I've drafted Sylvan as like a safe book holder, I've noticed a lot that everyone and their mom just has Solitaria built. And one of the downsides of Sylvan as a book holder, unlike Stenny, is that if Stenny does nothing the first round, like even if she like S3s a really tanky target and does nothing, it doesn't really matter too much because she can like ramp up over time. But Sylvan against Solitaria, if she doesn't like wipe their team in the first turn, she really becomes like a dead unit. So I don't like the matchup. And my opponent picks Winter here, so I'm forced to pick more aggressively anyway because there's no way I can play standard into this anymore, especially with Winter and Solitaria. So I actually pick Ida here to threaten all his units except for like Aiden. And I pick Bryceria because Bryceria is actually really good against his team. Granted that I can actually get to press S3, which is a whole other struggle that we'll have to find out later. And my opponent picks Senya. And I'm thinking I have to ban Senya because if he bans Bryceria, none of my DPSs are going to do a very good job at killing her. And we're just going to have to roll the dice. So we kind of have to pray for a few things. A lot of Solitarias and Winters are built at like 200 effectiveness plus, and that's in the range where my DJB gets reliably debuffed. So I have to pray that everything goes well. Also, this DN, can we talk about the DN for a second? Like, it's like blazingly fast. It's like 280, 290. Like, who runs this kind of DN? Please explain. But anyway, can't do anything about it now. We just kind of have to hope that my DJB has enough ER with Bastion to resist this Winter stun. And moment of truth, luckily he does. Not too sure if it's 15% or if it's actual ER, but you know, we take those. We have no complaints. We are a 50-50 gamer, as the kids say. And yeah, my opponent actually is discouraged from that resist on Winter to actually press S3 on my Bryceria. So I take this opportunity to just S2. I should have saved it in hindsight, but I had a feeling that this match was either going to be make or break depending on my Ida's performance anyway. So I'm not too keen on saving that S2 because I don't think I'll get a chance to use it later. So now we just have to like play the casino and just S2, and luckily we hit the first S2 with Ida and just like strip all his units. So that was pretty lucky. And at this point, I'm committed to the monkey. So I just press S3, but like, you know, just hit 5 head. Aiden dies. Sylvan gets to go. And my opponent actually gets robbed here because I think if Aiden dodged both hits, she should have been able to do a lot of damage to my team and potentially kill my Bryceria, depending on if the immortality gets stripped or not. But we gamba and we get another win from my opponent, so like no complaints there. We queue up elevator music for the next match, and we are up against a lot of champion players. Yeah, like as I said, like I literally lost almost 100 points in the span of like an hour, which was quite impressive even for me. But yeah, I don't know if I really wanted to upload those videos because that like upload those losses as a video, because it was literally just me losing over and over again because people would pre-ban Conqueror Lilias, or they would pre-ban like DJB Lidica and then first pick Conqueror Lilias, and I'm stuck. But yeah, in this match my opponent first picks APOC Ravi, and I already thought that was like kind of weird, but you know, like they pre-banned Aiden, so I could kind of see it. So I pick Conqueror Lilias and Stenny, and then it turns out my opponent is a cringe speed racer, so you know, I, luckily, am not a cleaver, so I didn't imprint race him, you know? Right? Right? No. No, I'm I'm a cringe speed player. I acknowledge it. So I wanted to give this guy an ego check. So I am speed imprinting him. Uh it's going to be tough depending on the Sid speed because my opponent actually has 3 units that are above 300 speed potentially. So I have to pick another fast unit. So I pick Acid here. So my opponent can either ban one of my imprints, ban Conqueror Lilias, or Acid. I take the really safe path, and I don't want this Sid to be 300 speed in case it manages to cut. So I actually go for the ban on Sid here. So I'm 4 speed down against his imprints. So it's already disadvantageous because Pera and Ran are like 10 base speed above my Conqueror Lilias. But, you know, my Conqueror Lilias does ego check him. My opponent emotes me, and he's he's the opponent that inspired the intro meme, but, you know, he doesn't know the speed of my Conqueror Lilias. I push back the Ran here, and it doesn't look like Sasha's is actually enough to cut. And I'm contemplating S3ing the Soulburn onto Pera, but I just decide that Peras aren't given like high quality gear anyway, so what's the point? As expected, Wanderer Silk is too fast for me to cut, and she can either push back Watcher Shuri or Conqueror Lilias, but I'm pretty sure they're going to push back Watcher Shuri so he doesn't get a turn, and it's like a nice safe S3 target for APOC, and that's what ends up happening. So I kind of got a feeling that this guy's APOC is on Crimson Seed because he picked it as a cleave anchor, so I decide to make a really risky Gamba play here and just try to clog up the revive pool. So as long as APOC does not bring back Ran with this APOC S3, we should be fine in like theory. Because the only way we lose is if Ran comes back and he kills my Acid and more importantly Stenny with the S3. And luckily, we win the 2 and 3 Gamba race and Pera comes back and she gets to do her thing. She's kind of like, she's the middle ground. Like, she's better than Wanderer Silk in this situation, but she's not, you know, like game losing as Ran. So now we just have to like monkey into this APOC and hope we can kill her before she kills my Conqueror Lilias and or Pera starts to control my team. And luckily we get the defense break and we get to send this guy packing. Yeah. I would feel bad, but he emoted me. Unless your Ran is like 310, like don't DNI, do not interact, like don't emote me. You don't know how fast my Conqueror Lilias is, you know? Judging by the speed of it, his Ran was just slightly above my Acid, which means that it was like 305, like ish. So like, whatever. Not too mad about it. It's nice to give cleavers a reality check with speed, you know? And in the next match, all my fast openers are taken, or like the safe fast openers are taken. I used to pick Pera to race against like Lua's or Conqueror Lilias's, but Pera is just too limited in this meta, I feel. Like, you can't reliably press S2, and a lot of teams are ETA proof, especially if they're Pera proof to begin with. So that's kind of an L. So I kind of just have to go for a really safe-ish opener. So I pick Faithless Lidica and Stenny because, you know, they're guiding light, they're stealth, they're very flexible. They're technically Sage Ball proof because if Sage Ball is not run on immunity, I can always soul burn him. I can just ban Lua and pick around the draft of my opponent's team. But yeah, it's bad. It's bad drafting if you draft to ban the first pick. You should honestly always draft to ban last pick if you draft correctly, if both sides draft correctly. But I just don't have great ways to deal with Lua, especially as a person that plays speedy. You'll notice this, but Lua does almost nothing to like tank down players. Like, the people that like first pick like Eden and pick a bunch of counter units, like Lua doesn't really hurt them, but the faster you play, the more debilitating Lua becomes because she's kind of like F10A but uncounterable, where she forces you to just waste the first turn, and that's such a big tempo loss. My opponent is picking a few surprising units like APOC. I'm sure this guy is not picking Cdom. There is no way. Yeah. They're picking Ruel because they don't respect my team's damage, and that's kind of like sus. But it's looking like I'm going to ban Lua because my opponent didn't draft in a way that made me, too uncomfortable. So this draft, I have ramping damage. Oh, I don't have ramping damage, but I do have two answers for APOC and Aiden, and like technically Ruel, because Bryceria makes it so that nobody can res. Zahak can cripple a unit of his choice with his S3 injury. But yeah, so we go into the match. But I actually want to pass turn 1 here because I don't want to push up my team so that Sage Ball can just strip the attack buff or immunity and put them to sleep. So I just S1 the Sage Ugly. And Sage Ugly actually presses the S2, which I think is a mistake. I think he should have just saved it so he could have the CR pushes and then cut my team down the road. But, no complaints here. I do not press my S2 with Zahak. JK, I actually do for the push-up. And I think I forgot to change the resource reduction EE because I got the attack buff again. But yeah, I run the Zahak S3 into Ruel. And I'm thinking that maybe with Zahak's S3 plus Bryceria S3, I should be able to kill this Ruel and Aiden in one turn. And so that's what we go for. And we just have to pray that my Misha, that isn't plus 30, allows me to hit Aiden. And we do. Big moan. And we actually do successfully kill Ruel. And APOC is able to take a turn. I think my opponent should just S3 the Lidica here because there's no way that he's going to have another opportunity to do so, especially when I am going to S3 him. But my opponent choose to be a little bit greedy and save it. So I take that opportunity to just reset this APOC. And by this point, the match is over. There's not too much my opponent can do. I checked to see if APOC resisted the Lidica S3 on the CR bar, just to make sure, because I was going to soul burn into Sage Ball. But my opponent, realizing that he doesn't really have too many plays left, understandably leaves. And yeah, look at that. We're back on a win streak. Of course, it's not as like big as my like 12 or 14 game loss streak. But oh, Jesus. Okay, we're fighting against Sixduck. If you've watched my channel previously, you'll recognize him from the Honest Bruiser matches against something featuring legend players. And it's this guy. He's a tank down player from Korea. It's going to be a Frenzy 5 match if I allow him to play the way he wants. And I've actually refined my drafting style a lot since then. So I do want to show off how my team should be able to aggro his team down. So I pick like what I like to call the Exodia draft, where I draft Conqueror Lilias, DJB, Stenny, or like Soul and Sage Vivian, plus Roy and a 4-span, which in this case, it is Opsig. So my opponent can ban any combination of my units, but they should be able to still snag a win against this team. And that's what I'm hoping for. Because Roy just does a lot of raw damage to his team, especially since they're slower and they don't contest him. Opsig can threaten to just delete units randomly, and Steady gives ramping damage. So if my opponent doesn't actually manage to kill the first turn, we still have that, and book for Roy. So my opponent last picks Kize, and I don't know what speed this Kize is at, so I'm just like forced to respect it and ban it, just in case they ban Conqueror Lilias, which they do. So this is a little bit of a awkward time. I think I made a mistake. I had a plan in my mind, and that didn't involve Operator Cigarette actually S2ing anything. So I should have traded Operator Cigarette's self-imprint to the team-wide imprint. Because the way I see it, I already know that my opponent is going to have like Gear Score Kingdom like out the ass. So I shouldn't try to actually S2 anything without an attack buff. So like this all made sense in my mind, guys. Like trust the process. DJB goes first because like that's the way he's speed tuned. I press S2, do a billion damage to the team because, you know, barrier inversion is fair and balanced. Push up my team with immunity so T Crozet can't actually cuck me. And I take the first turn to S3 with Opsig. She is on a damage build with Portrait, but again, like, if you don't remember in World Championships, I think his Ruel survived an Operator Sigurd S2 with attack buff, which was like kind of disgusting. And yeah, I S2 the Lionheart here. I should have checked on the CR bar to see if the Lionheart would have, not the Lionheart, if the T Crozet would have cut my Steny S3 because that's what I wanted to do. But, you know, hindsight 2020, I just kind of have to go into this Ruel and hope I can kill it. But it's kind of a tall order, especially with Aureus plus Troublemaker Crozet, damage reduction, and no, it's really close, but Ruel actually does survive. And Ruel is able to press S3, but it shouldn't be too bad considering that my opponent doesn't really have a good activator for Lionheart because none of my units like innately dual attack. But this dual attack actually matters. If you didn't notice, this FCC actually crit on our dual attack. So the dual attack itself was fine, but thanks to it critting, there's actually enough damage for my Operator Sigrid to die. And that really hurts. Because what that would have allowed me to do is that would have allowed me to S2 this Ruel and kill her, and then take the skill null off Lionheart or FCC. And then I would have had enough souls to continue going into this Lionheart Sirmia. I'm forced to just S1 once. And I kind of have to pray that I can finish out this game with Roy, but Lionheart is going to cut my Steny because of the speed buff, and the speed buff will allow her to press S3 and just wipe my team. Even though my opponent does not have defense buff, so he shouldn't be doing too much damage, my DPS units are like so squishy that I'm not sure that they're going to survive. My DJB doesn't have S3, so there's no mitigation for that. Or maybe there is, but like whatever, it doesn't matter. Like the point is that Lionheart is on lifesteal and Steny doesn't do enough damage because there's no attack buff. So I lose to that dual attack unlucky crit, but whatever. I'm complaining about it, but I got really good RNG against Aiden in that game a few, like 10-15 minutes ago. So you win some, you lose some. But it is nice to know that I could like potentially do this to 6 duck down the line. And I did increase the gear of Roy a bit, so he does have like 150-ish more attack. So if we meet again, my Roy should be able to kill his Ruel. Like, hopefully. We'll see. We'll have to see. Anyway, going into the next match. My opponent, luckily, does not ban Conqueror Lilias or Steny this time, and first picks Meteor Cowrick, which I found was like quite a unique ban. So, you know, I picked them up because they're fair and balanced. My opponent picks Politis to counter Steny and Conqueror Lilias, and I in turn pick DJB because DJB is Politis proof, depending. He's good against most Politis variants. Like, he's pretty decent against damage Politis because he lets you cut with units like Ida, and he's decent against Djinn Politis as long as they're not running Violin, because that's the only bad part about it. My opponent picks Sage Ugly here. Oh, sorry. I just saw his face and just threw up a little in my mouth. And just in case my opponent does end up banning DJB, I actually ban his Sage Ball here. But my opponent actually bans Conqueror Lilias, which is something I found pretty surprising. If I knew he was banning Conqueror Lilias, I would have just... No. It works out great because Sage Ball would strip, and my DJB is faster than most Sage Ball variant, so it all works out. I see that my opponent is actually a degen politist or like a crown politist, so I'm not too afraid to press this S3. And luckily, we're able to just ape in with Ida. And since we have 60 souls, fair and balanced, by the way, just totally fair and balanced, we're able to just go ham into his team. I'm not too loving the position I'm in, if I'm being too honest, because this Karina is about to do 1 billion damage to me. And this Handguy managed to cut because politist CR reduction is just really annoying. So I have to hope my opponent doesn't S2 the Roy here. But he actually goes for the S3 to prevent the CR pushback or the stun from Steny and to cleanse it off his Karina, I guess. So that's like kind of understandable. I just decide to start soul burning, or I'm contemplating soul burning, because if this Karina is able to cut my Roy, he's just gonna die. But I decide to be a little greed lord and just S3 the Karina, because Karina doesn't push up when she herself takes damage. She only pushes up when her team takes damage. So now I'm just free to start, like Roy's like really fun gameplay loop with just soul burning 50 times in a row. Karina procs, but I'm not too concerned. As long as Araz and Politis die here, I should be pretty fine to do what I want. Because I'm counting on DJB's S2 to be my backup DPS at this point. I'm not too sure if Steny dies to the Karina S3. Well, Roy gets countered and he's fucking dead. So like, goodbye, Roy. R.I.P. Karina goes for the S3 on Ida to kill her, but I'm counting on the fact that most Karinas, well, in the build showcase I saw, can't one-shot Stenys even with defense buff, and that's what happens here. So I think it's like pretty good. I'm like sitting pretty. My opponent can S2 or S1 here, but DJB's barrier inversion should do a lot of damage to Karina because the barrier is massive. Oh! Oof! Just destroys her, and my opponent kind of has no plays because DJB will tank for Steny until Steny kills his Handguy. And my opponent actually does decide to tap out. And we're at, a solid amount of points. And that's where the video is going to be until today. And as always, thanks for watching. If you have any room for improvement or like things you'd like me to do better or do differently, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and keep your eyes peeled because I'm making a Discord server soon. So that's something to look forward to. Anyway, I'll see y'all next time.